we're standing in the Museum of Comparative Zoology at Harvard University, and we are surrounded by cases and drawers that date to the time of Louis Agassiz, the museum's founder. Louis Agassiz was born in a small village in the Swiss Alps in 1807. By the time he was 23 years old, he had already earned doctorate degrees in both medicine and natural history. His father wanted him to become a doctor, but the younger Agassiz was much more excited about another field. He had fallen in love with the study of fish, the study of fossils, the world of natural history. He first came to the United States in 1846, and even though he was still a young man, he was quite famous, well known for his study of glaciers, for his study of fossil fishes. And he shortly thereafter joined the Harvard faculty. Agassiz was a celebrity. He was constantly written about in the newspaper, his photograph was frequently taken, people wondered about his comings and goings, his prodigious appetite, his great sense of humor, his ability to write on the blackboard with both hands simultaneously.
In 1874, a Boston literary magazine published an essay by one of Louis Agassiz's former students, a man named Samuel Scudder. Scudder talked about a sort of a unique method of pedagogy employed by the great professor. He told how he came to Harvard as a graduate student really excited about learning more about natural history. And although his major interest was in butterflies at the time, he was willing to do almost anything that Agassiz told him. So Agassiz began by taking him into the laboratory, choosing a bottle, and telling him to spend some time looking at the fish. Scudder was sick of the fish within 10 minutes, and he went looking for Agassiz to see what he should do next. But Agassiz was nowhere to be found. So he had no choice but to go back, follow the instructions, and spend the rest of the day looking at that fish. He was careful not to let it dry out too much. Sometimes he had to moisten it with alcohol. He tried counting the scales, played a little bit with the fins. He jabbed his finger down its throat to feel the sharp teeth, and he was just totally frustrated. He felt like he had learned everything it was possible to learn about that fish, and no Agassiz and no escape. He began to think about the smell. What were his friends and family going to think when he came home with, eau de fish on his body? Finally, he thought maybe he'd try drawing the fish. So just as he took out a pencil, Agassiz appeared. "Very good," the great man said. "A pencil is a great eye." Then he began to quiz Scudder. What had he learned? And Scudder went on. He explained the details of what he had observed. And Agassiz said, "Well, that's all good, but you've missed the most obvious point. You'll have to come back tomorrow and look at the fish."
This is a story about science, but it's also a story about close looking. It's a story about the 19th century obsession with material things. In the 19th century, it wasn't just scientists who looked closely to find information. Poets, politicians, teachers, lawyers, doctors, everyday people collected things as a way to understand the world around them. There was a belief that you could learn a great deal about looking closely at things, arranging those objects, sorting those things, and in many ways tracing the shape of nature through your observation of those things. And in many cases, they sent these collections to places like the MCZ for someone like Louis Agassiz to work with. And in fact, we're surrounded by many of those objects here.
So Scudder went home, and as often happens, after a good night's sleep, his mind was much more clear, and he felt like he actually had something he could share with the great professor. So when Agassiz came to see him the next day, he said, "Could it be that the sides of the fish are symmetrical and it has paired organs? Very good, said Agassiz. Facts are stupid things unless brought into connection with general laws. Go back and look at the fish. So he did. For 3 more days, Scudder looked at the fish, and each time he looked, he seemed to see something else. On the 4th day, Agassiz brought a new fish and put it beside the old one. And then another, and another, and another. And after 8 months, Samuel Scudder not only felt that he knew something about fish, he felt that he had learned something about the methods of natural science.
Scudder didn't begin with a textbook. Scudder began with a fish. And through close looking, he was able to learn what he needed to understand about this object and its place in a larger system.
Looking remains important. Today, biologists and engineers are working together to actually build fish robots to better understand the nature of fish locomotion. They are able to do DNA analysis to understand relationships in a way that Samuel Scudder and Louis Agassiz and their contemporaries could not. They are also using very high resolution imaging to look inside a fish. People are still using the method Scudder described today, looking closely at things that interest them.